Larkspur City Council on Wednesday, October 7th, 2020. It's now 6:30 p.m. Of course, we're still in shelter-in-place orders with modifications, so we are doing a video teleconference only. And by now, probably most of you know how to join, but the information is on our City Council webpage. You can email in questions tonight, and you can also call in, and that number is listed there too. So we will start with roll call. Allison, could you start with that?
Councilmember Kandel.
I am here.
Councilmember Hilmer.
Here.
Councilmember Paulson. Vice Mayor Haroff.
Here.
Here.
Thank you. And Mayor Waive.
Here. It's great to see all of you. Next is public comment. And public comment are for matters that are not listed on the agenda. This is the time for members of the public to address the City Council regarding items not on the agenda or that are not on the consent calendar. Is there anyone in our, and I'd like to acknowledge we've received some public comment in regards to an item that is on the agenda that we will be discussing a little later. So if you are here to discuss that, hold on, and business item 8.1 will be coming up shortly. But is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to the council on matters that are not on the agenda? Just indicate by raising your hand or Allison, did we get any emailed in comments?
Thank you. I'm looking for any emailed comments, and I see none for general public comment.
Okay, and it looks like no one has raised their hand in the audience, so we will close public comment at this time and move to number 4, which is approval of the consent calendar. Allison has sent me a note in advance to remove 4.4 so that Councilmember Paulson and Councilmember Hilmer can recuse themselves on that vote. So is there any other council member who would like to remove any item from the consent calendar for questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone from the audience? There are 5 motions on the consent calendar. I don't see anyone. Okay, so I'll take a motion to approve 4.1, 2, 3, and 5.
So moved.
It looks like Gabe Paulson and Scott Kandel seconded. I feel like it's Jeopardy, whoever gets there first, right? So do we have a roll call vote for this, Allison?
Yes. Councilmember Kandel.
Yes.
Councilmember Hilmer.
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Haroff.
Yes.
Mayor Waive.
Yes. And the reason for the recusal was because this issue dealt with a resolution that was within the geographic space of our 2 council members' primary residence. So they had to recuse themselves from that, just as a reminder to people. So I'll take a motion for the approval of 4.4.
Motion.
And a second? Sounds like, Kevin, you want to second that one?
I'd be happy to second that. That's fine.
All right. So we'll have a roll call vote on that.
Councilmember Kandel.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Haroff.
Yes.
Mayor Waive.
Yes. So that leaves us to item 5, which is City Manager's oral report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. Just a few items for you. Staff's been actually hard at work, and I want to acknowledge this has been almost all your disciplines have been involved in one way or another in working with your ad hoc committee, Mayor Waive and Vice Mayor Haroff, and the Commons Foundation to find a path forward. And I'm not going to report on that because I suspect the mayor and vice mayor want to report on the most recent meeting when they report on their committees. But I wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge that your staff's been working very hard on that, and really, I think we're headed in a good direction. Also wanted to alert folks that the final meeting of the General Plan Update Committee is on Monday at 6:30. And after that, we will be publishing the draft for comment and circulating it for general review. And we'll start the process of working on the accompanying CEQA document. So the council members who have not been participants in that committee will have an opportunity to check in with staff and start to vet the document. We really want to acknowledge the hard work of Neil Toft, who's with us for another item, as well as a team of consultants and a lot of support from assistant to the city manager, Shannon O'Hare, to get the document to where it's ready to go out. Even though I'm going to report again on COVID matters later in the agenda, I did want to confirm we had a lot of folks calling, asking had we opened up our playgrounds per the state direction. The playgrounds are open. The staff's been going around and untying swings and putting basketball hoops back together. So people can go enjoy those amenities. We really encourage folks to read the signage, be aware of the state's recommendations on how to safely use the playgrounds while we're in the pandemic to avoid any incidents. And we would greatly appreciate that. And then just want to also remind folks that there's this little thing, this election coming up, and we hope that everybody's paying attention. Your ballots have hopefully started to arrive. We are aware that the registrar has selected a number of locations around the county where you can drop your ballot into a box that's been set up. It's very much like a mailbox sort of thing that you can deliver your ballot to. So for those who don't want to actually put it in the mail, you can go to the county website and look up where one of these boxes is located, and you can hand deliver it to that location. With that, Madam Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Are there any questions of that report? Seeing none.
No, that's terrific, and I do encourage, as our city manager has done, to have everyone who's listening in tonight to go vote, which I have done.
Next, we move to council members' reports. Are there any council members who would like to report out on any activity they've been doing? Raise your hand. Yes, Dan Hilmer.
I just wanted to report, Madam Mayor, that we had a SMART board meeting today. And as representing the mayors and council members of Marin on the SMART board, we have been conducting a program of listening forums to take input from the public and residents of Sonoma and Marin counties on things that have been going on at SMART, new ideas they may have, any criticisms they may have, to help us fashion the adaptation to the current situation and to the future, including our financial organization. We are going to have a listening forum designed for Larkspur and Greenbrae on Monday, on October the 19th, from 5 p.m. to 6:30. It will be conducted by a Zoom, and Supervisor Damon Connolly and myself will be moderating that forum. Novato Mayor Eric Lucan, who's the chair of SMART, will also be in attendance, as there may be other SMART directors listening in. Anyway, I wanted to make that announcement, and Dan Schwartz and the SMART staff will be helping to provide outreach and advertise that forum so that it gets exposure and people know about it. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else of council have? Yes, Dave Paulson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just two brief items from the Marin Wildfire Prevention Agency. Once again, I just wanted to encourage people to go to the chipperdays.com website. And, one point was brought up recently that considering the property tax that we're all paying, the cost of removal for some of the vegetation has been estimated to be between $200 and $500. So it's really a great program to recoup your costs and really get the vegetation out and keep the neighborhood and your house safe and defensible. And one other thing was the prevention agency is really trying to get in touch with seniors who did not get their senior exemption forms. Now that property taxes are due and some people may have had exemptions, they're working really hard to ensure that anyone who missed that can be heard and considered. So hopefully more on that by the next meeting. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, Councilmember Candell.
Yeah, I just had one thing I wanted to bring up. I had spoken to an individual who works by the bridge construction. And we had a conversation about the effect that it's having on businesses. And what I thought after speaking to him that might not be that difficult would be possibly to have a page on our website where we can update kind of a schedule of construction. So maybe grade things, very loud, in terms of the disruption to the neighborhood. So the people who live there or have businesses there maybe can have a heads up and plan accordingly. I know this is not on the agenda, but I just wanted to bring it up as maybe something we can add to a future agenda or to, I'm not sure the best way to agendize this, but I thought I would discuss it because I think there's potentially an easy fix that could just help get people information so they could make plans accordingly. That's all. Thank you.
Well, I think on that matter, and Dan Schwartz might have more to add to this, is that the project management company there has a point person, and Julian Skinner, our public works person, are there on a daily basis to assess the situation. We do have on our website the Bon Air Bridge updates. I don't know if they have decibel amounts that are listed there, but it does have a lot of scheduling material available. Want to add to that at all, Dan Schwartz? Or
I think, as the council knows, noise is a very challenging issue. People's understanding and tolerance of noise and the effect it has on different people in different situations varies. The bridge construction team is trying to inform people when significant projects are happening, but significant elements of the project are happening. But different people who live and work in proximity to the bridge use the word loud differently. And so we can't actually, there's no simple way to publish the decibel levels that are going to occur on a given day of a project of the magnitude of the bridge project. So that's a real challenge for us.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There is a liaison on site who's available to all the business owners and property owners. And he's very available. And I would not be surprised if the individual who spoke to Councilmember Candela is familiar with this person.
And again, I know it's not agendized. My question is, it sounds like there is not something available to the public right now. For example, over the coming month, when are we going to be doing a major portion of the project? When are we not? And I'm not saying the exact decibel levels. I guess my question is there any reason that we couldn't get, I'm sure when they're putting pylons in, it's not a spontaneous decision. Hey, you want to put a pylon in today? It's something that's been planned out. Is there any reason we couldn't get that information, make it publicly available through a website or some other way so that people can have that information?
Yeah, so the challenge that we face, Councilmember Candel, is that we actually can't say this is going to happen at such and such a time on such and such a day. There's no element of a massive public works project that can be managed that way. The announcement would have to be, this particular activity is going to occur in this 2-week window, probably on this day. And the issue, I think, with the gentleman who spoke to you is he would like us to say it will happen at a specific time on a specific day, and that's simply not feasible. We can only say it'll happen in this week, or it'll happen in this, we think it'll happen on this day, and we think it'll generally happen in the morning, but we can't manage the project to, things slip, things don't happen. The public works projects are not so precise that we can say this will happen at this time.
So
thank you for explaining that. I appreciate it.
Since this was not an agendized item, and I know it might be something of greater depth, I think we should probably just limit it to this point so that we don't open a subject that we haven't provided enough public awareness time for.
Okay.
Any other things, Scott?
Nope, that was it.
Kevin, do you have anything?
Just a couple things on that. I'm really happy to see the progress that we're making on the bridge. I've been getting some inquiries from folks in the community about timing, and I've tried to be reassuring that we're on time and on schedule. So I think that's terrific. And I've actually been involved, as I think you all know, with a group throughout fellow city council members in the county on sea level rise, and we've been having conversations about different projects that have been going on. I participated on a meeting earlier this week about the Bothan Marsh down in Mill Valley, and lots of studies going on there. And I kind of reminded them that we are actually doing hard work here in Larkspur with the bridge. We're getting the bridge in the ground. We've got steel in the ground, and we've got mitigation projects that'll be going forward during the course of this coming year. So I think that's something to really highlight for our community throughout the rest of Marin.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to let the council know that Public Works Director Julian Skinner just sent me a note reminding me that a bridge update is scheduled in November. So this will be on the agenda in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And that's something that we should be really proud of as a community, the progress that we've made with that project and the environmental mitigations that we've been, are in the course of implementing and will be implementing during this next year is something that should be highlighted throughout Marin County.
So before I give my report, I see there's a hand up in the audience. Is this in regards to a question of the council members' reports? It's the number that ends in 151.
Yes, I will unmute caller ending in number 1151. You may speak to the council at this time.
Are you asking a question of one of the council member reports?
Nope.
Oh, would you like to identify, or are you just listening in?
I was intending to make a public comment earlier on, but was unaware about how to get recognized.
All right, well, I'm going to put you on hold until we're finished with this. Public comment was about 20 minutes ago, so hang on. So let's, Allison, we'll just keep going with this, and we can return to public comment before our public hearing. All right, that gives me the last report. So I'll sort of begin with saying I am a member of the League of Women Voters, and I encourage people to look at votersedge.org, which is the League of Women Voters analysis of candidates' positions and analysis of ballot positions. Take a look at that. But on other things, on Monday, city manager and myself met with 6 downtown merchants of our downtown historic corridor to discuss some thoughts and ideas that they had for how to decorate and make festive the downtown area for the upcoming holiday season. And it was very nice to see this enthusiastic group of local downtown merchants who are going to put together an idea and a plan to present to the city about how we can continue to bring people to the downtown area during this really challenging time when they've been closed. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work with them. Our city council, our Chamber of Commerce representative, Julie was unable to join us, but I'm hoping she'll be participating in the next time. Last Thursday, I attended the Southern Marin Disaster Council as one of their guests. It was a very interesting gathering of not only the professional staff of the Southern Marin fire area, but also a lot of local representatives. And they invited Dr. Africa, who is with Marin Behavioral Health Center, to talk about the pandemic's effects in Marin on mental health and the challenges that people are facing now. It was very good, and the resources that are available to community members to receive behavioral and mental health care through the county is available on the on the Recovers Marin website. But he provided some really early preliminary data of what's happening and what they're seeing in increasing calls for help because of pandemic effects. The Commons is a group of local residents who have been working with the city and the library staff and the library director for many years to work on our new Larkspur Library and Community Center development at the Rose Lane parcel. And we have had an ad hoc committee for several years now. Prior to me, it was Vice Mayor Haroff and Mayor Ann Morrison. And we've been meeting regularly with them, even through pandemic, to work out what the direction that we envision and they envision that the future of that parcel will have. And our last meeting, I'm pleased to say, we are working out an agreement between the Commons Foundation to be the primary fundraising arm of a new project that can start there, hopefully within the next year or two, once they are able to do some fundraising. And we're continuing to work on the language of what this means for the relationship between the Commons, which is a nonprofit foundation, and the city. So I look forward to seeing that and more to come, probably by next month. Lastly, the League of California Cities is the main representative organization for all 491 cities and towns in California. And they have an annual conference, which is today, tomorrow, and Friday. It's supposed to be in Long Beach, but it's not. It's on Zoom. So I attended today, and so did Councilmember Gabe Paulson. And it'll be going on for the next couple of days. I am our voting delegate, and the voting delegate this year, there's only one resolution at the General Assembly on Friday. And it's really in regards to social media and how to request and them to remove material which promotes criminal activities. So if you're interested in reading the resolution, I can forward it to you. I'm not sure how the voting is going to go this year when no one can gather in a spot, but we generally debate the resolution, and that'll be Friday. So I'll come back to you on that. And then lastly, school's back in session on Monday. The Neil Cummins kids were out there, and so were Hall Middle School. I didn't see Redwood in action, but just for those members of our community, the streets are busier, the sidewalks are busier. Just take care when you're driving. Take care to stop at crosswalks and let the kids go past because they're finally back in school. So that's my report. It is a challenging time with the Zoom. So if we do have this one gentleman who would like to give a public comment, I'll open it up to one because everyone else was in our room at the time we started. So would we like to introduce him back in? Sir, can you tell me your name and where you live? Hello.
Yes, good evening. This is Dr. Stephen Wagstaff.
Yes, sir.
Yes, and I've been in touch with Mayor and others regarding my practice over here in Larkspur and the bridge work. So I wanted to put that on something for you to consider. Earlier in the meeting, I was on the phone and was not clear about that would be recognized with the *9. So I understand that public comment was over 20 minutes ago.
So Dr. Wagstaff, that motion is going to be coming on a upcoming agenda. So I'll make sure that you are informed when that upcoming agenda item comes within the next month or two.
Well, I appreciate that, and I also wanted to acknowledge Member Candell for bringing it up because it's specifically what we're talking about, but also to challenge Dan Schwartz's comment about nothing able to predict things, because my practice has been so significantly influenced by this that it's traumatic. And even with direct comments of, hey, tomorrow everything will be done by 9, and then it goes till 10. I have to reschedule patients, and done a great job to figure out about what's going on with the bats and the fish and the birds and the whatever else that you're worried about, but nothing has been done. After tolerating this for 2 years, I was unable to practice for a full week, and it has nothing to do with audible levels. It's ground shaking and patients wanting to leave.
Okay.
So it's more emergent to me, and I think you know clearly about this because we've communicated.
Yes, we do. And I will. We'll continue to follow up on this.
It's getting worse. yeah, so you tell me the date and I'll be there, or we'll be there with more forces, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Allison, I think we'll move on to public hearings. We have a public hearing tonight. We have 7.1, to introduce and waive the first reading of Ordinance 1051, amending Chapter 18.06, Zoning Administrator, 18.34 Slope and Hillside, 18.35 Residential Floor Area Ratio, and 18.64 Design Reviews of our municipal code. Can we have a staff report, please? Welcome, Kristen. Hi.
Hi. Almost thought I wasn't going to get my camera working here. Good evening, Mayor Way and members of the council. Nice to see you all. As you know, this is for text amendment 20-25. Due to the COVID-19 crisis that we've all been experiencing, the city has reduced staffing levels, and we have been looking for creative ways to reduce the processing timelines and the work involved in processing planning permits. And one of the ways that we have come up with trying to reduce some of the time involved in processing planning permits was to expand modestly the role of the zoning administrator. I'm going to call that ZA for short. Currently, the ZA reviews a variety of smaller, typically non-controversial projects, such as minor floor area ratio exceptions, fence height exceptions, and design review applications for commercial buildings where no addition is proposed. In Larkspur, the ZA can be either the planning director or appointed staff member. In our case, it's been myself for a number of years, but it's important to note that the role and the person occupying the role can change. It won't necessarily always be myself or the planning director. The ZA acts as a hearing officer with a process similar to the Planning Commission. A zoning administrator application requires submittal of detailed plans and supportive documents. And once the application is deemed complete and a public hearing is set, we do a 300-foot public noticing, just like the Planning Commission applications. But unlike the Planning Commission, who has a set schedule of bi-monthly meetings, we can schedule a ZA meeting on an as-needed basis and as often as necessary to try and keep these applications moving in a streamlined process. Also, the ZA applications, when we go to a hearing, we don't prepare a detailed staff report like we do for the Planning Commission, and that reduces the actual man hours involved in processing these permits. During the hearing, the application is just verbally presented. The plans are there for review, and when the decision is made, that decision is memorialized in a notice of action, which will include conditions of approval and addresses all the findings required in the code. And these are the same findings that are assigned to the Planning Commission to make when they hold a hearing. There's no difference in that manner. If it's determined to be appropriate, the zoning administrator it's written into the code that we have the ability to refer an application up to the Planning Commission. And this is done when the details of the application prove to be controversial, or when the ZA is unable to facilitate a resolution that will alleviate perceived impacts to the neighbors that could be very negative to them. So with regard to the ordinance before you, the Planning Commission was first presented this staff suggestions for text amendments on June 9th. As time permitted, we prepared the ordinance and then presented it to them on September 8th. And it was continued to September 22nd for revisions that they requested and adoption of Resolution 1-20, which is recommending that the council approve this ordinance. As recommended by the commission, the ordinance would amend several sections within 4 separate chapters of the Larkspur Municipal Code, including the zoning administrator duties, slope and hillside regulations, residential floor area regulations, and design review. These amendments will modestly expand the range of projects that are exempt from design review, provided they meet zoning, and modestly increase the range of applications heard by the zoning administrator. And this includes allowing the zoning administrator to hear minor second floor additions of up to 300 square feet when a second story already exists on a home, and allowing the ZA to hear an amendment to a slope use permit that was already approved and completed when someone wants to come back now and do minor grading not to exceed 25 cubic yards. Currently, we have to take that to the Planning Commission, And they're usually non-controversial and pretty minor changes to the site. In addition to the above requirements or changes I just described, we've also taken this opportunity to clean up the design review section of the code because it was written in a manner that really elicited a lot of questions and discussion by people who are trying to understand when they had to go to which hearing body. So the changes that we propose in there have been intended to improve readability, remove awkward language, and clarify the projects that are exempt from review, projects that are subject to design review, and the applicable decision-making body that will hear those projects. So instead of discussing each section that is proposed in the ordinance for amendment, I am certainly here to answer any questions any member of the council may have. After which we recommend that the council open the public hearing and then move to introduce and waive the first reading of ordinance 1051. And that concludes my report.
I think we'll begin by asking the city council members if you have any question regarding these 3 different elements that are going to be changed or amended. And you can speak to all of it, or you can speak to just one issue of it. Looks like Councilmember Paulson has the first question.
Yeah, hi, Kristen. Thank you for that report. Just a couple questions. One is, I read the summary. It wasn't clear to me if something goes to the zoning administrator, does that change any of the notifications? So if someone's doing a second story addition of 100 square feet, are the neighbors all still notified, or
Yes.
What's the difference in postings and communications?
There is no change. We do the same process for ZA that we do for Planning Commission. All property owners within 300 feet are notified of the proposed application. And the
Okay,
plans
thank
are
you.
available for review on the city website.
Okay, and if any neighbor has any objection, then it goes back to the planning, process. So the zoning administrator is fast tracking things where everyone is notified, there's no objections. And if there's any objection, then it's out of their authority.
Well, we can approve a project as ZA with objections if the objections really aren't pertinent to the findings that we have to make for approval. It's important not to act on a project or make a decision solely because a person doesn't like it, not necessarily because it isn't meeting the findings. So we look at it from a finding-based decision. And if we can't make those findings, then I have the ability to deny the project or to instead refer it to the Planning Commission.
And that holds for the Planning Commission as well. If
Yes.
their objection's not relevant to the findings, they can also be ignored or overruled.
Right. I mean, you need to not allow a project to get sidelined by disputes between neighbors, but to focus on the facts, which are, does the project meet these findings? Does it have significant and unreasonable impacts that would impair views, light, air, or,
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Are there further questions of the senior planner, Kristen?
Madam Mayor, it's Kevin. Just real quick, I just want to express my appreciation for Kristen and her hard work on these issues and kind of cleaning things up. I just want to get clarification that in terms of substantive review on design review issues, this is really just an administrative cleanup. This is not really something that changes the capacity of the Planning Commission to conduct its authority under design review.
No, it doesn't reduce their authority, but it does take some minor projects that would go to them normally and assign them to ZA.
Right, and that's fine. But in terms of the standards that are applied for design review, we're not contemplating a change.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this point? All right. So this is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing to the public to ask questions or make comments on item 7.1, which is amendments to the ordinances in regards to the zoning administrator's authority. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question or speak on the matter 7.1? Yes, I see Laura Ethel has her hand raised.
Laura Ethel, you may unmute yourself to speak to the council.
Laura?
Okay, can you hear me? All right. I submitted an objection to a portion of this to the Planning Commission, and I found that there was no evidence in the record of my objection. So I've sent everybody a copy of what I wrote to the Planning Commission. And my objection is not to rewriting some of these rules and making them clearer. It's to giving the zoning administrator additional discretion, because in previous occasions, she has ignored the rules despite complaints from the neighbors. Now, I have a very specific occasion in mind when I complained about a fence that she approved, and I've given you the address. You can walk by there and take a look at that fence and see how imposing it is. It does not conform to any of the rules. And even when I pointed out afterwards that they hadn't even followed her expanded interpretation, she didn't do anything about it. So 73 Madrone looks like a fortress, and the rest of us have ordinary fences. Nobody else gets to have a fence that gives them complete privacy the way 73 Madrone has. Now, if she continues to ignore the rules the way she did with this fence, I don't think she should be given any additional discretion. And that's all in my letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Allison, is that a letter that can be forwarded to us? No, it sounds like Ms. Ethel sent it to the Planning Commission, but.
Yes, we have a copy of the letter. I can read it aloud now or add it to the agenda packet following the meeting, depending on your preference.
I think she was pretty clear in what her letter stated. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this matter?
Mayor Waive, this is Planning Director Toft.
Yes.
I just would like to note for the record that Ms. Ethel's letter was acknowledged. It was in the Planning Commission meeting, and in fact, planning commissioners did speak to the topic to some degree, so they were aware of the objections.
So in reference to just the subject matter, is the zoning administrator's decision appealable?
Yes. It's appealed to the council directly.
Have we had a lot of appeals on that? Or do you
Very few since the early years when we had our first big boom before the 2008 crash. We had a few.
So there is redress if someone does not think that the zoning administrator's decision was appropriate. There is redress.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
So, Madam Mayor, this is Kevin Haroff. I wanted to reemphasize that point. Although these are we're enabling some efficiencies administratively and dealing with some certain issues, we're not removing the opportunity for anyone to seek further redress and appeal. And I think that's important for the public to understand that those opportunities still exist, will continue to exist, and nothing is going to change that.
It's not unusual that we refer an application to the Planning Commission when it's clear that it's unpopular amongst the neighbors. It's always best if they get a hearing with 5 members as opposed to 1 person.
And I recall several appeals that came to us that were fence line oriented also. Last probably 8 or 9 years. Are there any other further questions? I see one more attendee. Mr. Got a New Car. Could you, Mr. Got a New Car, could you please tell us your name, where you live? And you'll need to unmute yourself, please, sir, or her.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes. are you here to speak on item 7.1?
Yes, I'm addressing this issue you're talking about right now. I don't feel comfortable with this either. That's a second story, 300 square foot addition is a substantial change to a house. And what was it, 9 cubic yards of soil removed and a 20% gradient? I don't know, this is a lot. Have gone through a few neighborhood changes and had some applications approved myself, but I like the planning commission. They're more focused on these kind of issues every time. And I don't know how many people it takes to complain before it goes up the ladder, but that should be a little more clear, if you know what I mean.
All right, thank you, Mr. Got a New Car.
Yeah, I don't want it to get lost in her office is what I'm trying to say.
Well, we're talking about the ordinance.
I do know exactly what you're talking about.
All right, thank you. So just to clear on that question is it's not an additional, I don't understand it to be an additional 2,800 square foot addition goes to the zoning administrator. So just to clarify that question.
The zoning administrator, the maximum square footage the ZA can hear for a floor area ratio exception permit is 500 square feet, of which up to 300 square feet could potentially be a second story.
I see.
That's kind of how it breaks down when you read it all.
All right, looks like we have no other, are there any email sent in questions, Allison?
Thank you. I'm looking for any additional emailed public comment about the proposed ordinance, and I see that there has been none.
All right, so then I'll close the public hearing on this and bring it back to the City Council for further discussion or questions that have come up in the course of the public comment period. I don't see any of the 5 council members with any further questions. So it sounds like we need to have a motion to move to introduce and waive the first reading of Ordinance 1051. Would someone like to make that motion?
Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to make that motion. It's Kevin Haroff. So I would move to introduce and waive the first reading of Ordinance 1051, amending chapters 1806 and subsequent items. So
I will
Is there a
second.
second? Do we need to Skype list all of those amending chapter numbers, or is subsequent items and okay?
It's okay as read.
All right, great. Okay, so we need a roll call vote, please, Allison.
Councilmember Candell,
Yes.
Councilmember Helmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Haroff,
yes.
Mayor Way.
Yes. That brings us to business item 8.1, which is the Mobile Home Park Ad Hoc Committee update. I would like to refer members of the community who are listening or will listen to this later to several public comments that we received in writing, which are now listed on the agenda page, so they can be read at any time by you. And there is also a memorandum. Has that been posted yet on the city site? I think so.
That is up on the site as well.
And the memorandum was written by Vice Mayor Haroff and Councilmember Paulson. So those are available and we will be discussing those too. So I would like to open this up to our ad hoc committee members, Vice Mayor Haroff and Councilmember Paulson, to lead this discussion item.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor Way. So I guess, Kevin, do you want me to start off?
No, I think you should take the lead on this, Gabe, because you've been playing a very effective leadership role in this conversation.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. So we visited this topic about 2 months ago, and I thought I would go over some of the events from back then and now, and I'll keep it brief. A lot is in the memorandum. Basically, we since the last meeting, we had a rent postponement then of the $75 per month rent increase, which was the main topic of discussion, since we got together during COVID. And the original rent increase was planned for June 1st of 2020. and it was postponed 2 months, and then again 2 months till October 1st. So it just took effect this month, and it's the annual rent increase that is scheduled to go into effect again on June 1st of 2021. So in summary, we've met with the residents and with the operators of the park as well. I would estimate 10 meetings. I didn't look at my log. It might have been 15 meetings, and continually, looked for different solutions and different possibilities. I increasingly found that one of the programs that was being offered by the park, which is summarized in the memo, had a lot of targeted assistance, and it became more clear to me that that was something that we should discuss and pursue. So essentially, the MEHT program is one that offers lower income residents substantial assistance. They do have to go through a process, and some residents have gone through that. One, I believe, is receiving assistance. And to me, that really seemed to be some evidence of a safety net, that those people who are in risk of losing their homes or in financial distress do have some way of being protected in the near future. There's also the voluntary mediation that the county offers, and I went to the DA's office and I found that that was attempted in 2019 with some success. Some residents participated, some didn't. And I brought all these issues to both the owners and to the residents, and was hoping that they could continue to have discussions on this. So at this time, looking at the overall experience we've had, we originally started with both the Golden Gate RV Park and with the Marin RV, park, the Marin Park residents. And we found that the Golden Gate Park, both the operators and the residents had no interest in rent control. And at the original meetings, we had the 48 people who were on 5-year leases represented, and they, decided not to come to the meetings after the first 1 or 2 meetings. So it was essentially the 21 short-term lease people, of which only 5 have consistently come back to the meetings. And in our last meetings, I really tried to emphasize that the communications with the Marin Park owners and using the DA's office and using the MEHT program were the first recourse, and not having seen as much participation and having seen a lot of misunderstandings and miscommunications, I really encouraged them to pursue that as a first avenue. And so with that, we really came to the conclusion that for the time being, rent control or rent control ordinance was not the best course of action. And moving forward, I think by the next council meeting or by next month with Vice Mayor Haroff, I'd like to decide what we're going to do with the ad hoc committee. I spoke with the city manager, and it seems like there are many issues that are on the table that may go beyond Marin Park, and we may want to rescope and bring that to the council. And with that, I hand it over to Kevin, or leave it over for any questions.
No, Madam Mayor, it's Kevin, and I want to thank Gabe very much for his leadership in marshaling these conversations forward, because I think it's very productive, and I think he's given a very good summary of where we've come down in terms of our conversations with this community. It's frustrating, I know, for some folks, but I think we're kind of creating a middle path that will be productive going forward into the future. So thank you, Councilmember Paulson, and I've got nothing more to add.
Can everyone hear me?
Well, there you go. Yeah, you just you unmuted.
Yes, it sounds like in conclusion, you feel that the work of this committee focusing specifically on this issue has no further opportunities with it, but that you would like to transition it into a broader discussion of affordability and housing in the future.
I think, Gabe, go ahead and speak, but I think that's right.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I wasn't really prepared in this meeting. I think I spoke with the city manager a little bit and the vice mayor. I'd like to have a clear proposal and a request for direction from the council, but I do believe that we exhausted the topic for the moment. I'd like to emphasize that it's a very changeable situation. We have COVID. We don't know what's going to happen with back rents and many other things. So I'm not closing the door. And I honestly have to also add, I care deeply about Marin Park. I've invested an enormous number of hours there because I was primarily focused on seeing that nobody vulnerable, there would be in jeopardy or kicked out on the street. I continue to have that. I'll continue to stay in communication, but as an activity for the city and as an ad hoc, I'd like to see what by the next meeting, how we may expand this or rescope it.
Yeah, rescoping, I think is the better word. But one of the benefits of the conversation that we've had is providing some clarity about what opportunities actually exist to members of that community in terms of helping support their financial situation. And it would be nice to just be able to say, we could wave a magic wand over everything and say, we can change everything. But I think we've done a good job in facilitating a conversation and identifying opportunities that can be helpful to this community. And I think we need to kind of move to a next step.
Okay, Dan Schwartz, you had something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to suggest that procedurally, the ad hoc committee is suggesting that its ad hoc assignment is done. So I would reframe the discussion of what comes next as the Councilmember Paulson and Vice Mayor Hoff might like to discuss a new ad hoc committee with a different charge. But I think it's important procedurally that you close the books, because that under the Brown Act, you formed an ad hoc committee. It had a purpose that the committee is reporting is exhausted.
Right. I agree with that completely. So let's do that.
Are there questions from the other council members of the ad hoc committee? Dan Hilmer?
Only to acknowledge and express my appreciation for all the hard work done by the ad hoc committee representing the city and the council members. I know the amount of effort and I know the concern which is shared by all of us for these issues. And I just really want to tell the council members who participated in this committee, thank you very much on behalf of the council and the community. I know it took a lot of work. I know that work will continue, and I'm just grateful. Thank you.
So this is a business item, which means that is there any member of the community who would like to speak on this matter? 8.1, and I would like to acknowledge we do have several written comments that have already been received by the City Council from a group of residents and from Mr. Carroll. So is there anyone, Allison, who's raised their hand within the participants who would like a few minutes to speak?
Yes, Kevin Carroll, you may unmute yourself and speak to the council.
Hello, Mr. Carroll.
Good evening. You got me? Mayor and the council members. I'm really disappointed, quite frankly. We were not told that this would be on the agenda. I had to discover it for myself when the agenda was published last week and saw that it was listed as a business item. We got no warning on that. We had to discover it ourselves. This report to the city council that the members have put on the website obviously came late in the day today, because I've been checking back for the last several days to see if there would be a staff report attached to this. So I really haven't had a chance to respond. You do have the letter from the other committee members and my own that I sent this afternoon, again, without seeing what Councilmember Paulson had written. So my question is quite simply, 80% of the mobile homes in Marin County are covered by rent stabilization, with Larkspur the biggest exception. And we've asked this question since the beginning. Why is Larkspur different? And personally, Mr. Paulson has been terribly supportive of the program sponsored by the Mobile Park Owners Association, which was developed specifically to try to foil rent stabilization in Southern California. So there's a lot that I think needs to still be discussed about this issue. And if it's on next month's agenda, that will give me time to prepare something and to respond to Mr. Paulson's comments tonight. But there were several misstatements that he made. At no point was Golden Gate Park involved in any of our discussions. It was, I thought, just directed at Marin Mobile Home Park. I would love to hear what attempts Mr. Paulson made to contact all of the tenants of Golden Gate, of which only 20 are affected if it is a mobile home ordinance. How many did he contact? And how were they invited to the meetings? We did not, there were only 5 of us because that's all. In fact, Mr. Paulson specifically wanted to cut down the number from 5 to less to make the conversations easier. That's why we didn't invite all of the tenants in the park to the meetings. So I think there's a lot of things to be addressed, but if you say that it's going to be on the agenda for next month, I'll be satisfied with that and come prepared. Thank you.
Go ahead. This ad hoc committee had been going on long before Councilmember Paulson joined the council, and there were meetings, I recall, in which people attended city council meetings from various other residential areas. Kevin, did you want to respond to any of that, or?
No, I think I've expressed my views on the subject.
Yeah, I can, Mayor, I can respond. I think that I was on the ad hoc committee when it originally formed. It was well organized and orchestrated by the city manager and the city clerk, and invitations were sent out, and all the stakeholders mentioned in the memo were invited. I don't know if Mr. Carroll was one of those, but I think we had several meetings, and towards the end, it became less formal. It wasn't organized through the city manager's office, and I did a lot of one-on-one meetings with primarily the Marin Park resident group. But I think that's all been done. And to the point of why Larkspur is different, I think that's in the memo as well. We spent a lot of time looking at the conditions between what's needed in our city and what's going on. And the MEHT program is actually a flexible program, and the details are there. And I invite any points. I sent this and spoke with the group many times to raise questions and objections, and we just met a few nights ago with Mr. Carroll, and I think a lot of that has already been discussed.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no further questions and I see no further hands, if there are no further questions of our ad hoc committee, then we will accept their memorandum and the direction that they gave, and we'll continue to have the discussion about looking at what this ad hoc committee might evolve to be studying next. All right.
Sounds good.
We are now on to 8.2, which is general fund financial review. This goes to our city manager for general fund update for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the third in a series of presentations that we've been giving you as we sort of familiarize ourselves again with our budget and the challenges that we're facing. This is leading up to the council looking at what steps and direction it may want to go to start to address some of the challenges that we're facing in the pandemic economy. I have prepared a PowerPoint for you this evening and want to note that Administrative Services Director Kathy Orm, who is the city treasurer and finance guru, is present, and anything interesting in this presentation is probably something Kathy prepared for me. So I'm going to turn on the slideshow now. Hopefully that's come up in the window. So just to remind you of the schedule we've been following, we started with a general discussion about service levels, and then we looked at the first cut of closure on last fiscal year. So that's how we spent our September meetings. Now we've reached October 7, and we're going to give you our early indications and trends as best we can. Noting, as you'll hear shortly in the presentation, that trend analysis of the first quarter information can be very difficult. And then wanted to review what the general fund pays for. So we'll go over that in brief for you and entertain any questions that the council may have. So we're going to start with what the first quarter trends look like in the general fund. I'm pleased to say, at least in the first quarter, expenditures are trending the way Kathy and I would expect. We haven't had any unforeseen costs. Staff's doing a good job of managing operations and keeping us on budget. We talked about cash flow with you at a prior meeting, and one of the things I mentioned is, some departments are big spenders early in the year, some departments are big spenders later in the year, but we plan for that, we're aware of that, and the departments are all following their patterns the way we would expect them to. One thing we had confirmed last week, I was very pleased to have this confirmed directly by the county administrator. Property tax deferment will not be an issue for the city. The county will continue to operate under what's called the teeter plan. And under the teeter plan, the county treasury makes the city whole, makes all the recipients of property tax whole against any shortfall, and then the county will pursue those shortfalls. So in this case, if there are deferments, essentially the county is absorbing the temporary loss by the deferments, and the county will be the entity that will deal with whether there will be any penalties associated with the deferment. You've probably seen some press coverage about how the tax collector's planning on dealing with that. I first want to broach the subject of sales tax. And sales tax in the first quarter can be tricky because of the way it comes to us. And we don't really see sales tax in the first 2 months of any fiscal year. And that's because there's a lag in sales tax coming to us of 2 months. So as I talked about in the last council meeting, what we're doing to give you these graphs as we go through these conversations is we're taking the amount budgeted for a particular revenue stream and we're just dividing it by 12. So essentially each month, 1/12 of our projected sales tax for the year is $141,000. And so if we were accruing our sales tax on a nice steady line, then we would hope to see an equal amount coming in every month. But unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. We saw our first real receipts for the fiscal year just arrive in September. And unfortunately, they make it difficult for us to tell you with data what we think is happening in our sales tax base. And I'll explain that a little more. As I mentioned, there's a 2-month lag. So a lot of what you're seeing in the September amount, that 207,000 that you saw for September, are the July receipts. But not all receipts show up cleanly right when we expect them to. The state is constantly collecting and working with retailers to get all the receipts in, to account for them and distribute them back out. So the state has a formula to issue advances based on what they think is happening in the economy. The formula is heavily reliant on the prior year's performance. So right now, these receipts that we received in September partly reflect the state applying a formula that it uses that looks at July of 2019. Well, in July of 2019, we were in a different type of economy. So it makes it even more difficult for us to tell you what we think is trending in the sales tax base at this point. We really are going to need to get through another quarter to have a really good picture of what is happening. We are talking to our sales tax consultants who have access to the state's database, and can go in and try to pull out some of this information as we're going along. So they're going to be reporting to us some in November. But unfortunately, I just can't tell you with data what's happening out on the ground. I can tell you anecdotally that we are seeing some vacant storefronts, but the storefronts that we're seeing vacant at this point are not some of our larger sales tax generators. So we have to hope that our larger sales tax generators are still performing fairly well in light of the current economy. I wanted to remind you just from our last presentation that this pattern is normal, that we don't see receipts. So this was actually the full fiscal year last year, and we never see receipts in July and August, any real money. We start to see it come in September, and it'll slowly start to build up as we go through the year. So we would expect a similar pattern to start now in this year. But of course, as I was saying, we don't know what effect we're going to feel from the fact that the state uses a methodology that looks back a year. So one of the concerns that Kathy and I were talking about today is, for these parts of this fiscal year we're in now, these receipts are tracking at a nice pace. And so when the state's advancing us money based on last year's performance, that's great. But as we all know, starting in March and into April and May, our economy flattened. So what may end up happening, I won't be surprised, is that the state will probably end up advancing us sales tax revenues. And then we will get to March or April of this fiscal year, and they may actually tell us we've been overextended, and we may not see any revenues in those months while they true up the numbers. So I'm less confident we'll see this nifty bump that we experienced in the last fiscal year.
So Dan, this is Kevin. Can I just ask a question about that?
Sure.
So are we kind of stuck with that scenario where, they'll claw back money that they're giving to us?
Well, it is the methodology. So the good news is Kathy and I are constantly monitoring what's going on and managing cash flow. So it's not something we can't handle. It just makes it really difficult for the staff to give you a good sense of what's going on in the current economy. We just don't have the data at the moment to tell you exactly what we think is happening at the cash register. And so we probably will get our first cut of that after another quarter goes by. We'll probably have a better sense. But because of the lag, we won't know how the holiday season did until February and March of next year. And so, this is going to be a year more than others where we probably will be adding some anecdotal assessment of what we're seeing out in the community to give a sense of what we think performance is like.
Dan, I'm sorry, Scott, I have a question. In a previous meeting, you talked about the new law that went into effect where online sales go back to the city, the sale was made. Is that accounted for in this anywhere, or is that done annually? How does that fit into this?
So remember, I'm showing you here, this was last year just to show you the pattern. But my understanding in reviewing the literature from the state is that the state, when it's doing this advance here of 207,000, is now starting to account for what they think our distribution from the internet sales pool will be. That's part of this mix. Exactly how much of it is, I'm not certain. It's such a new revenue stream for the state to manage that I don't know that they yet have been able to give us a firm grasp of that. So we've actually asked our sales tax consultants for a briefing on that specific topic, and that's part of the November meeting we're setting up with them.
Thank you.
Yeah, it just seems like there's some uncertainties there that are a little worrisome.
Yes, yeah, but again, as long as we keep track of our cash flow and we don't think those advances are telling us the wrong story. What you don't want is you don't want to make decisions based on those advances. You want to wait for the data to catch up, so you're making decisions that reflect the reality.
Right. No, absolutely. I understand.
So here's something exciting. Now, granted, we budgeted for a very low amount of hotel tax to come in, and made our budget work this year. That said, we got a very nice payment from our main TOT source, which is the Courtyard by Marriott out at Larkspur Landing, and we are almost 19% above pace. So that was really exciting. And on this next slide, I can show you we didn't get any check. We didn't get a check from for TOT from the Marriott for July or August, but then in September they paid us for both the August receipts and the September receipts. And again, the green bar on the left is showing you what after one quarter would reflect 1/4 of the amount we budgeted, and you can see that receipts have come in above that. So now, remember, this is not the amount of TOT we have enjoyed in the past. But it is still a positive thing that it's coming in ahead of the pace that we posted.
Dan, can you tell us what the expectations, what percentage of our normal revenues from TOT did we lower our expectations to that were just beat by 20%?
Yeah, so let me advance. I've got some of that data a little bit farther, and I'll make sure to give you that context.
So Dan, it's Kevin again. Just on that, I think that last slide was really terrific news, and I'm really glad to see that the Courtyard's doing well. Do we have any more granular information about why it is that they were able to respond in the way that they've been able to? Is that because of they're taking advantage of opportunities with the state through San Quentin or whatever that might be?
I haven't had a chance to engage the general manager recently to get a sense. I know that the Marriott was attempting to bring in essential workers, which were seeking a place to stay.
Yeah.
And just in general, while people aren't traveling like they used to, some people are traveling. So, and one reason the Courtyard has been a popular destination over the years is it's very inviting and welcoming to the business community. And I do think that business travel into Marin has picked up a little bit in recent months.
So it sounds like it's a mixed but positive bag with those guys.
It's better than your gloom and doom city manager projected. So.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you.
So what are the trends? And this will get to Councilmember Candel's question. So with property tax, we have every reason to think it's on target. Housing values remain strong. And in fact, we're seeing transfer tax dollars in very high numbers. So the transfer tax dollars come in when there's sales of homes. You pay a tax for transferring property to a new ownership. And we use that as a benchmark to give us a signal that properties are selling. And we're seeing very healthy returns there. So that's an indication to us that property is selling, and it's selling for strong assessed value. So we have every reason to think our property tax will come in at budget. And then we are uncertain where sales tax will be. As I said, we budgeted for 1.7 million. So that's a drop of almost $1 million from what we've budgeted in the past, about $750,000, I think, from our last budget. But we were performing on pace for as much as 2.8 million last year before the economy, before the pandemic economy started. And then we've typically budgeted conservatively for our hotel tax. And so we would often budget $600,000 and then be thrilled because the last few years it came in more in the magnitude of $800,000 to $900,000. So, so to answer Councilmember Candel's question, we budgeted for $160,000 this year. We normally would have budgeted more like $600,000 to $700,000. So, you know, that's while the Marriott is outperforming the $160,000 we put into the budget, you know, they're still tracking to land at, you know, between 160 and 200,000, and that's well below what we grew accustomed to in the last several budget cycles. As I mentioned, some other factors, the transfer tax has been strong. The other thing is building permit revenue has been coming in better than we thought it would. We've had more activity than we expected. Folks have been doing solar installations, remodeling. Some of those are not big ticket revenue items. Others have been of late a little stronger. So that activity is promising, but of course we're headed into the rainy season now. So we may see a slowing of that trend. So before I move on, that is the summary of where things are in terms of trends along the revenue streams. And so I can pause here, Madam Mayor, if anyone has a question.
So before we do move on, we've been asking questions along the way, but are there any questions about this part? No, I see none. Keep going. And it's
okay.
Excellent news that the Marriott is coming back online.
All right, so I think what would be best, Madam Mayor, is if I do the expenditure, what do we pay for, and then which is the next agenda item, and then we can maybe take public comment collectively.
Sure.
Okay. So what does the general fund pay for? It is not a presentation that Kathy helped me put together unless we have a good pie graph. So we'll start with a nice pie graph of the general fund expenditures. And I'm going to go over some of the bigger pieces of the pie for you shortly. And this is straight from your budget book. So this is available online to anyone who wants to go into detail about it. So police and fire are 55% of the general fund. The fire is 4.9 million, police 4.07 million. These are essentially the same costs from the year prior, and we were able to do that and maintain service levels in those organizations. As I've mentioned a few times, the employment contracts are both up at the end of this fiscal year for both these entities. So we will be very shortly starting the conversations with our employees about what the economy looks like and what the member agencies of the two joint powers authorities that we belong to, the Central Marin Police and Central Marin Fire, what the member agencies can afford in the coming year. So that'll be an important and challenging conversation, but I do want to acknowledge the work that the chiefs and their staffs did to find a way to keep costs flat, particularly given how much service we've needed to call upon from both police and fire in this challenging time. Next is Public Works, which represents 15% of the general fund and includes our engineering and maintenance divisions. Their total budget of all their different categories in the general fund is $2.46 million. However, it's important to note, because we're only talking about what we pay for in the general fund tonight, we do a lot of cost recovery in Public Works on the engineering side. So a lot of our engineers' salaries and compensation are actually billed to projects, and a lot of those projects are grant funded. So the general fund bears the $2.46 million, but at the end of the year, Kathy transfers money in to offset quite a bit of the salary component of this cost. As we talked about in the budget cycle, this year, to make things work in the budget, we've been more aggressive with cost recovery. And what I mostly mean about that is we're transferring more of our soft costs than ever before. We've often tried to keep our soft costs in the general fund and leave more grant money for the actual projects, but we've had to be a little more aggressive in moving some of the city's soft costs in against some of the cost recovery opportunities to help defray and help the general fund through this difficult period. The next largest component of the budget for the general fund is the administration, which is about 10% of the budget. Within administration is the city manager, the city attorney, the city clerk, our human resources function, our technology function, and the finance department or division. In total, we spend $1.69 million on administration, and because we've reduced hours, we have experienced some reduced responsiveness, and we started to work through systems that are helping to combat that. But there are times we know the public's been a little frustrated with us in terms of our ability to turn things around now versus what we were doing in the past. The other thing we've done as part of streamlining and cost-effective measures, we've centralized communications under administration. So all the department communications are coming through administration for analysis and in some respects preparation. The banners, for example, that you may have seen that we put up in downtown, that was an in-house project that we did now. So we didn't print the banners, but we created the graphics, we created the text. And those are the types of things now we have centralized all our communications. We've been more and more focusing on providing more support in the other departments so the other departments could make cuts in their own communication budgets. And so that's been really helpful overall, but has been a significant change. Planning and buildings, roughly 5% of the general fund. And it's almost entirely salaries for the three divisions, planning, building, and I added heritage. It's not really a division, but it is a function within this department that we call out in the budget. We've reduced staff in number and hours. And so we know that particularly early on, several of you heard from constituents that were struggling to get permits in a timely fashion, timely manner. I'd like to say some of that was expectations we had set when we had full staff and we had full hours. We were turning things around at a pretty good clip. And in the early adjustment to the reduced staff and hours, it took us a little bit to find our rhythm. I don't think we've had those complaints anymore. We've been able to communicate better with applicants so they have an expectation of when things will be turned around. One thing that we're really struggling with, and Planning Director Neil Toff would happily speak to this for quite a while, I'm sure, is we don't have the analytical bandwidth we used to in planning and building. And there really is something to the old adage that planning handles 3% of what we do as a city, but 97% of what the council hears about. And there's a lot of analysis that goes into preparing the material that you deal with in the planning realm. And so we're a little more in a reactive position than we're comfortable with, but we are still moving forward and getting things done as much as we can. Community services, which is 7% of the general fund, and this is the library and recreation. And this is 1.16 million of the budget. The library has historically been about 6% of the budget. So the deepest cuts here were in recreation, where we went from 2.5 positions to 1 position. And so that certainly has affected things considerably. I want to remind folks that the community services are often where we have to cut when the economy struggles. But here, with respect particularly to the library, but also in recreation, COVID is driving a lot of our decision making, and we simply can't spend the money even if we had it, because we can't operate the way we normally would given the COVID situation. One big change that may become permanent is that we've eliminated all in-house programming in recreation, so we're relying entirely on third parties that contract with us to do our recreation programming. That's probably something we'll continue with going forward. We think that's probably best for a city our size. And in particular, it helps us build up partnerships with entities that have more depth and experience at offering specific programs.
Dan, to that point, since we have a collaborative relationship with the Corte Madera Park and Rec, is sharing some resources and sharing our program materials, is that similar to what they've done? Is to use outside sources rather than in-house?
Corte Madera has a deeper recreation department and offers a mix of both in-house and outsourced programming.
Okay, thank you.
And so then back to the pie chart, I highlighted 5 categories that are significant in the budget, but I hadn't planned on talking about a lot this evening. You know, we always have some level of debt service. We have our new PERS refinance debt here. We have our citywide contract services. We do, we have a lot of things that we contract for from third-party entities that we track in a special account area of our budget. The city council has a budget. This includes the stipends that are part of our municipal code and part of the being a general law city, as well as these are your costs to run meetings. So the Zoom cost, for example, is in your budget and things like that. And then building maintenance is a big ticket item that we have to deal with each year. I also wanted to just briefly say that during our budget season, there was definitely some misunderstanding by a few members of the public who kept saying we aren't spending enough money on streets. And the pie chart calls out this number of 956,000 on streets. This is mostly the salary and benefits of the people that work for us on streets, in the streets area. A lot of our street expenditures are not in the general fund. They're in other pots of money, and so they don't show up here. And so I just want to make that clear that that's what you're seeing. Same with the parks. A lot of what you're seeing in that parks number are the costs of our people who work on the parks and the outsourcing we do for some of the maintenance work in the parks. And so now is probably a good time to take some questions.
Yeah, Dan, it's Kevin. Just to go back on the PERS number, that seemed low to me. Maybe you give a little more explanation about how that number gets calculated.
So, Kathy, I think I might defer to you to answer that question.
Sure. This is where we were capturing our PERS UAL and our unfunded liability with PERS, but we paid that off at the end of last year, or like in April or May.
Right.
So this represents our first interest payment for those pension obligation bonds. So I wanted to continue to show it separate, and so it stands out so we can talk about it.
So that's not the unfunded liability, Vice Mayor.
No, our unfunded liability.
That's what we're going to pay in interest this year.
Is going to pay interest for our,
so
our pension obligation bonds. We've paid our.
Okay, that helps, because that was confusing to me.
Yes, we can change the name.
Are there other questions of this presentation?
So just one more question. Is there anything else that is showing up here as far as PERS is concerned, or is it just those interest payments?
The PERS, there are PERS payments in our salary and benefits. That's kind of in a line item for each department, depending on which plan they're in. Okay. So there are more PERS costs, yes.
Okay. It might be helpful going forward to kind of break that out, because PERS is, something I worry about. And
Okay.
I want to make sure that we're being very transparent about our obligations there.
Okay.
I'd like to suggest, Vice Mayor Harp, that maybe in the budget season, if you'd like a summary sheet of PERS costs, it might be easier to do that.
That's fine.
It's longstanding practice for our current obligations of what would, if we go in the weeds, the normal cost is in the different department budgets. So.
Sure, and I appreciate that, but it's a big deal, and I think it's important for us to be very open about it. So that's all fine. I just want to make sure I understood what was being presented tonight.
Sure, and just want to remind the council and the public that the pension obligations of the city are covered extensively in your annual audit.
Yeah, sure. Okay,
Great.
Thank you.
Any other further questions? Then I'll ask if there's any member of the public who has a question on the general fund expenditure analysis and 2020 trends and indicators. Okay, seeing none, bring it back to us. Are there any further questions? And thank you for providing this overview. I think it's a nice opportunity for refreshing those of us who've been on the council for a while, and also helping to clarify and introduce budgeting processes to our new council members as well as the public. So if there's no further questions on that, we're going to continue to move along to 8.3, which is—
I was just going to make sure, Madam Mayor, just to remind the council, this is the last meeting where I do the lecturing, and in the next meeting, I think, is really where we'll be looking to the council to identify topics and financial issues that you'd like to explore in the coming months.
Okay. 8.3 is update on city activities, and we've done the finances with regards to COVID, but maybe you don't need to spend time on the finances, but we can update what's going on with Marin Recovers and how it's affecting Larkspur's businesses.
Well, probably the most significant things have been mentioned earlier in the meeting, so I want to reiterate them. First is that children are back in school. So it's been very interesting to me and some of my colleagues to watch, because Marin was not one of the first counties to be authorized to allow kids to go back to school, but Marin is definitely one of the first counties to have kids, a large number of kids back in school. So, my hat's off to my colleagues in the education world for making that happen. It's certainly a logistic challenge. That's a big one. And then for us in the city on the Marin Recovers, right now the Marin Economic Forum has taken the lead in the Marin Recovers process of trying to develop some countywide plans that businesses and government entities and nonprofits can all coalesce around. And they're hoping to develop that into a final form and present it, I think, to the Board of Supervisors at a coming meeting. But the management group and also the body that from MCCMC that Councilmember Paulson and Vice Mayor Harp sit on have had a chance to see the plan in one of its earlier iterations. There's been a lot of push to narrow it down to 2 or 3 achievable goals. I think in some of the early iterations that went around, it had 10 to 15 different objectives or goals in it. And I think now the talk is, let's get 2 or 3 things on the table that we can really go after, and then we'll come up with 2 or 3 more, and we'll just keep working on it. So, topics that have been discussed quite a bit are how do we make sure there's adequate childcare so people can go back to work, for example. In the government realm, one of the topics of conversation is, are there any changes that can be made to the way that local agencies do their permitting processes that can be beneficial to helping with their recovery? And, these are difficult topics because we don't want to cause long-term changes that we weren't prepared for. But we do want to be helpful. And so we're trying to work our way through these conversations. the mayor mentioned that we were contacted by a group from the downtown area, and they are working with us to figure out how do you promote during the holiday season in the COVID world. And so we're trying to do more of that. We've actually gone from one of the last cities to permit parklets to now being the city that's allowing probably the most, I'll call it San Francisco style parklets to occur, because we have all these businesses coming up from San Francisco pitching their ability to build parklets. And anyone who goes by the left bank can see that we've worked with them to allow a structure that we think balances the COVID implications and the need to dine outside, the coming change in weather, with what the community can change and allow in terms of effect on parking. The parklets have been permitted in other outdoor uses of public space, and conditional use permits to be outside have all been done on sort of rolling 3-month basis. Some of the entities that now want to do something more significant, like Left Bank, we're giving them a year. So the 1-year permit will give everybody a chance to decide if it's something that should be here or not, and will allow them to recoup the investment that they're making. So that's the plan, and that's still a work in progress. We're talking to 2 of the other parklets about what their long-term plans may or may not be. And then playgrounds are open. That's been an interesting discussion around the county. This really is going to end up being one of those times when we're asking the community to police itself. You know, we've posted the rules and we'll do our best, but we're really going to ask the community to be respectful of one another and to read the signage and try to adhere to those rules. We understand children don't always understand the rules, and when they're having a good time, they forget about the rules. So parents, we hope you'll be there to help guide children to make the right decisions so that we can all enjoy our outdoors and our outdoor equipment safely and comfortably and share those amenities. The other thing is we've had an uptick in complaints to our shelter-in-place complaint line. So that's a good sign in the sense that word's out that there is a vehicle for people to submit their concerns. The more concerning thing, though, is some of the complaints suggest maybe folks are getting a little too relaxed, and we want to make sure we're assertive with our business community in particular, that they need to follow these rules about safe practices in COVID. We don't want to fine anybody, we don't want to shut anybody down, but the council's probably seen in the press that 2 counties were actually reverted to more stringent rules this week as a result of a spike in their COVID cases. So the state is demonstrating that they are willing to do that. And so we need to be vigilant to not only protect ourselves in terms of our health, but also if we're going to be able to say to our business community, you can operate, you can count on being open, we all have to work together to make sure that's done in a safe manner.
And
with that, Madam Mayor, I'll turn to you.
I think we were cautiously reiterating that to the downtown community business members we spoke with on Monday, that there's a lot of enthusiasm for a lot of activities and rejoining a lot of fun activities that Larkspur has had in the past, like the Food and Flower Festival and the Wine Stroll. But we really need to recognize that this pandemic and virus is still very much a part of our community, and could possibly change at any time, which means that we want to encourage the businesses and our residents to continue to act conservatively so that we don't have a resurgence and get shut down, and that would ruin even more things. So, and lastly, get your flu shot. I recommend that for everybody. That's my nurse hat over here. Get your flu shot, and that's also a recommendation by many of our health professionals. So.
Just so you'll know, Madam Mayor, I've already had 2 flu shots this season. So
Get the doors.
And the second one took me for a loop because it was the senior shot.
Ah, all right. Well, I haven't gotten that one yet.
I have.
Are there questions on this last COVID update for the evening? No?
Just one comment. I really appreciate the city manager's efforts to work with our local restaurant communities in particular and the left bank to be very progressive on exploring strategies to open up in a safe way. And I think we've got a ways to go to make that happen successfully, and we're coming up on a new season. But it's encouraging for me to hear that we are in a leadership role in that regard.
So we have a busy fall. We have October 21st is our next meeting. I'm going to try to zoom in from a remote campsite. So we'll see how that goes. But I will probably, I'll have to give updates as I go along, but I might not be in attendance at the next meeting, and the city manager and vice mayor know that. So look forward to seeing you all around. And I think we're adjourned. If there's nothing further. Nothing further?
Nothing further.
See everyone hopefully on the 21st.
Thank you. Good evening.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.